This is Michael Parker. I'm a volunteer for the Samuel Proctor Oral History Program at the University of Florida. Today's date is October 16th, 2025, and I'm here at the home of Sam Rickard, located in the Villages, Florida. Mr. Rickard, would you please state your full name and when and where you were born?
Samuel V. Rickard Jr. was born in Duquesne, Pennsylvania, on August 4th, 1926.
And how do you spell Duquesne?
Duquesne is a French name. It's spelled D-U-Q-U-E-S-N-E.
What is the earliest memory you have as a child?
One of the earliest is helping my mom wring the clothes out with an old-fashioned washer that had a side wringer, and my fingers got stuck, entangled with the clothes, and almost went into the wringer. And my mom hit the top of the wringer, released it, and so she was able to get my hand out.
How old do you think you were when this happened?
Maybe 3 or 4, somewhere.
And now you're 99 years old.
99, yes.
All right, tell us about your family, your siblings.
I had an older brother that died before me as an infant, so I think I was overly protected growing up. And then I had a sister, Marie. She was 4 years younger than me. And then a brother, Jim, he was 7 years younger than me. And then a sister, Dorothy, who was 14 years younger than me.
Okay. And did your brother Jim ever volunteer for the military?
Jim was in the Navy, in the Army. He was drafted. He worked for the telephone company, and he was stationed in Georgia, and that's what he did in the Army, doing telephone work.
All right. Tell us about your mother.
My mother was born in Pennsylvania, but her parents were from Europe. I think they were from Czechoslovakia. And when my grandfather was a coal miner, and they took in boarders and saved up enough money and to go back to Europe and buy an acre of ground to eke out a living on this acre of ground. And about that time, my mom had finished the 8th grade, and they took her back with her. And she stayed there for a number of years until my dad became of age, and he sent for her.
Tell us about your dad.
And my dad's father, he was a coal miner also. And when my dad finished the 6th grade, Grandpa put him to work in the coal mines when he was 11 years old. And I guess he worked there until he was about 20 or so, and then he got a job in the steel mill. But when he became of age, he had saved up enough money and sent for my mom, paid for her passage on the ship to come back to the States. And shortly after that, they were married.
How would you describe your family life growing up?
It was typical young kid, I guess. At first I was probably overprotected, but then I guess I was real shy as a kid, and I didn't go out much, and so by the teenage years, I had a lot of freedom to do what I wanted. I kept out of trouble, and
okay. How about your education?
Finished high school in June of 1944.
Where'd you graduate from?
I graduated from Duquesne High School. And I wanted to join the Navy Air Corps, but I was rejected because of my eyes. So then I didn't want to be drafted, so I joined the Navy just before my 18th birthday.
And how was high school? How many kids were in your class?
There were about 240 some kids in my class.
Do you know any of them today?
I know of one girl who was in my class, and I managed to find her on the internet, and so we keep in contact periodically. Two
99-year-olds keeping in contact.
Yes.
Since high school.
Yes.
That's remarkable.
And as a side, she was the most bashful girl in my class. I was the most bashful boy. So maybe there's a connection there. So.
What did you do before joining the military?
I worked in a steel mill. I got a job between the 11th and 12th grade in the summer, working in a brick shed, unloading boxcars of bricks and bags of cement. Then I continued working there on weekends and holidays, and then after graduation for another 2 months until I joined the Navy.
And what was the name of the company? Do you remember?
The name of the company was Carnegie, Illinois Steel Company, and which later became part of USS Steel.
Okay, and that's Carnegie, Carnegie.
Mm-hmm.
Where were you in December 7th, 1941? Do you recall?
I was sitting in the living room listening to my parents' radio, an old Philco 3-band shortwave radio, and I heard the news that the Japanese had attacked Pearl Harbor, which was kind of, I guess, what would you say? I was really stunned to hear the news that they attacked our ships in Pearl Harbor. Yes. Okay.
Can you tell us when you joined the military?
I joined I believe in July of 1944, shortly before I became 18. I didn't want to didn't want to be drafted and maybe end up in the Army or Marines, so I didn't want to be in a foxhole.
Okay, and did you, what was your first try at the military? What did you want to be?
At first I wanted to become a pilot, but because I had taken pre-flight in high school, and I passed the written test, but then when I went for the physical, the Navy flunked me because of my eyes. I had astigmatism, and I could have tried the Army Air Corps, but I figured if the Navy rejected me, the Army would too. And I might have gone in and become a navigator or something, but I wanted to be a pilot.
Oh, prior to going to the recruitment station, did you talk to your dad and your mom about whether or not you were going to join the military?
No, I don't recall. My dad and I weren't too close. He was gone a lot because he worked in the mill and he did housework on the side. Mm-hmm. And so he was gone quite a bit. But sometimes I would go on his jobs with him, and I did learn some basic electricity wiring from him.
Was there a recruitment station in your town?
No, he was in Pittsburgh. It was about 10 miles away.
Okay. What happened? How did you get there?
I'd take the streetcar, and there was a big network of streetcars around Pittsburgh, and they went through my hometown. Do you remember how much it cost to get on a streetcar in 1944?
No,
it wasn't very much. I have no idea what it costs nowadays.
And so you went down to the recruitment station, spoke to people in the Navy?
And signed up, and
after you signed up, what did they tell you to do? What did you have to do?
Well, I go home and wait for them to call me or notify me to come in. I guess so they put a group together that sent to the Navy training camp in Sampson, New York.
That was boot camp?
That was boot camp, yes.
Okay. Was that near a lake? Was it near a lake?
Near a lake, I believe, because I remember being on boats a couple of times. They were doing rowboats. And then we did target practicing with rifles occasionally, and then firefighting. They would show us how to fight fires, oil fires, especially being around ships that would have oil on them. And then I was a non-swimmer, and so I had to go to take classes in the evening to learn how to swim, and I finally learned to do a basic dog paddle.
All right, and what was your rank when you entered the service? Recall?
I guess they called it apprentice seaman when you entered. Apprentice seaman, and when you finished boot camp, maybe you were a seaman, the lowest rank. Maybe it was called third class, seaman third class. And when they sent me to electrician school, I became a fireman first class. Fireman third class.
Let's talk about boot camp. Do you recall knowing anybody in boot camp, running into anybody?
Yes, there was a couple of guys that were in neighboring towns that were in boot camp with me, and I did keep in contact with two of them, I believe, shortly after I got out. And then one guy, he had the same last initials in our name, R. So Charlie Robinson, he was from Massachusetts, and we kept, we were kind of bosom buddies in boot camp. And then later on, when I wanted to find out where he was, I sent a letter to his parents to find out where he was, and it became pen pals with his mother. And we kept in touch for a number of years after I got out of the service, and until she passed away.
Can you tell us a little bit more about boot camp, some of the things that you did during boot camp?
Yeah, like the target practicing, and the rowing a boat, learning a little bit about seamanship. Oh, and after we finished boot camp, a couple of us went into town to get a beer one year. Mm-hmm. And lucky me, I got a bad bottle of beer. They said it was lager, and I didn't know any better. It tasted like tobacco juice. And I got about half this bottle down, and I got all of a sudden I had to throw up. I ran to the restroom and threw up. And I guess it was a bad bottle of beer. Tasted like tobacco juice.
And were you in your uniform when you
I was in uniform, yes. And the bartender offered me another bottle, but by then and for the longest time I couldn't stand beer after I got out the service.
While in boot camp, did you have any type of special equipment that you had to qualify with, besides the firearms?
No, not that I recall.
How about the best memory you have in boot camp?
Oh, well, associating with some of my buddies, we hung around together.
Did you receive any promotions?
Not in boot camp. Maybe when I finished, went from apprentice seaman to seaman third class.
Okay. And what was the hardest part of the military lifestyle that you had to adapt?
Well, the hardest part was adjusting to the routine where you got up early, went to bed early, and took orders from the different people above you.
Did you keep in touch with your family while you were in boot camp?
Yes, I sent with my parents. I kept in touch with letters, and I ran into one of my high school classmates there in boot camp. On my one classmate, he was quarterback of the football team and the class president. He'd gone to Colgate University, and one weekend on a Saturday, the Colgate football team was playing a Navy team, and it happened to be, I guess we had a football field there, and so I saw my classmate play the football game at the boot camp, and at halftime when they were running back to the for the halftime intermission, I was there when they were going back, and I saw him. Howard called his name out, and he stopped and turned around and looked for a few seconds, and he says, "Oh, hi, Vince," and he turned around and ran back in with the rest of the team, and I never saw him again after that for the rest of my life. And I found his name on Google not so long ago, where he passed away about 8 or 9 years ago.
How about the everyone at boot camp? How were they feeling about being in boot camp and having to go to war?
It was a strange feeling, because I had hardly ever left home by myself. I always stayed at home with my parents. I never gone anywhere by myself, so it was quite an adjustment being in the military.
Okay, so when you left boot camp, where did you go?
From boot camp, they sent me to Detroit, Michigan, to the electrician school at the Detroit Armory, in Detroit. And the first month I was in the tool crib, handing out tools to the students, and then the next 16 weeks was training to become an electrician.
And did you have background on electrician? Was that easy for you?
I think I have a feeling that's why they sent me to electrician school, because I had worked with my dad doing some house wiring when I was younger, and said they must have found out that I had worked with my dad, and they sent me to electrician school.
And how'd you do in the school, in the 4-month school?
I did pretty good. I had an average of 93, I think. And somewhere I recall I was third in the class of about 37 guys.
Very nice. Yeah. And what did you do after that?
And then after we finished electrician school, they sent me to Norfolk, Virginia, maybe because I was in one of the top in the class, and it was called a degaussing school, where they learned how to magnify these ships that were made out of steel. And they had a sensor in the channel, and ships would go over the sensor, and it would draw a waveform on a graph and show how much magnetism in the ship. And so they come into a slip where had cables underneath, and when the ship would anchor there, they would join these cables together to form a real giant solenoid, and they had banks of batteries in a battery room, and they would pulse high current through this cable back and forth, strong and weaker and weaker and weaker, and that would get rid of the magnetism of the ship itself.
And you use the term degaussing. Is that DEGAUSSING?
Yes.
So your job going into the military was as an electrician?
Yes. No, they trained me as an electrician.
Okay.
I knew a little bit about house wiring, but they really gave the deep down theory of electricity, and then that was my basic start for my career as an electrician and maintenance electrician, troubleshooting, and then I got into electronics and industrial electronics for the speed control, the paper mills, and in Ford Motor, they had dynamometers, speed control controlled by electronics. So it was quite an adventure.
And what happened after that? Where did you go?
From where? Oh, from Detroit, the housing school.
From Norfolk, Virginia.
It's on a troop train, and we went to California to a receiving base, and I was there for about a month, and I was waiting to go overseas, and I guess they didn't send me overseas until they reworked all the fillings that I had in my teeth. They replaced 18 fillings in about a day or two, and it didn't do a very good job because I don't think a real dentist had worked on them. The guy that was doing it was a young guy. He was in dress blue uniform like the regular Navy guys. But anyhow, after they did that, then they sent me overseas on a trip, ship going to Pearl Harbor.
Okay, do you remember how long it took to get to Pearl Harbor?
It took about 4 or 5 days on this ship to get to Pearl Harbor. And then they was there a day or two, and then they assigned me to this yard minesweeper, the YMS 151. At the time, it was in dry dock. It had seen a lot of duty during the war, and escort duty, and I guess it needed refurbishing. So it was in a dry dock for a couple of days or a week, and then after they got out of dry dock, it was maybe 2 or 3 weeks later, the Japanese surrendered, and when news of that got around, everybody on these ships had rockets that were shooting rock flares into the sky, and they were starting to fall back down, and it was kind of scary. I was afraid one of these flares was going to come down and hit me, and I'd get burned from the heat in that flare that was coming down. But I guess we survived, and the next day some of the guys went into town in the Pearl Harbor, and they had a big celebration and parades, and the one the ship's cook named Hardy, he was a photographer, and as a hobby, and he took some pictures of the people celebrating in town. But and so after several weeks, and we headed to the South Pacific and ended up in Okinawa.
All right, tell us what you did for recreation when it was available.
Oh, well, the guys got together and pitched in, and we bought a movie projector, a regular 35 millimeter projector, and we showed movies at night, and there was a lot of I guess Hollywood sent a lot of movies in those cans overseas, and quite often we would exchange them with other ships. And then one of the guys, the chief machinist mate, he played the saxophone, and he entertained us occasionally with the saxophone music.
I have a picture here of the YMS 151. I'm going to show it to you.
Yes.
And does that look like the ship that you you were on?
Yes, that's the one. It's made out of wood planks.
And what was it used for?
It was used, I think they did a lot of escort duty for convoys, but I think we could sweep harbors to get rid of the mines that were in the harbor. And I think that's what we were supposed to do after the war ended, to go and sweep mines from maybe Okinawa and Japan. They had, we towed some kind of floating things, was steel cables that were out on both sides of us, and when the cables were in the water low enough that they would snag the mines that were anchored with a chain, and they would come up to the surface, I think, and maybe went to the end and snapped that chain, and the mines would float on the water. Then they would shoot them with the machine guns and explode the mines.
Were you in the bottom of the ship?
Yes, I was down below. I was in the electrical room.
Okay.
There was two rooms. The one rear, what do you call it? The rear machine room was for the big engine that drove the propeller, and the forward room was the electrical generating room. We had two small generators that generated power, and then one big generator, a diesel motor that drove a generator, and it showed, we towed electrical cables, that big electric cable that floated near the water surface, and they would pulse high current through these cables, and that in turn made magnetism, and it would cause these magnetic mines to explode. But we had some practice runs near Pearl Harbor, but we never actually did sweep for the real mines.
Tell us a story about going from Pearl Harbor over to Okinawa. What happened to the ship?
After we left Pearl, the machine, they used electrical controls to control from the bridge to the control them for the drive mechanism. And one night, on their way, they lost power. We lost power, and so the control mechanism dropped out too, and we were dead in the water, just bobbing around. And all these other ships that were in the convoy, maybe half a dozen other minesweepers, and the mothership had to circle around for a while until we got power back up and running and on our way again. That was a little exciting.
And then what happened?
And then
You went towards Okinawa.
yeah, we stopped at one other island, either Anahuac or one of the small islands, and then another island was Saipan in the Marshall Islands, and we stopped there for a couple of days. And I remembered one of my neighborhood buddies was stationed there in the Air Force. He was in the ground crew, and so I went ashore and I looked up my buddy's cell, and I went in his barracks. He was sitting on his bunk bed, just staring into space, and I guess when I walked up to him, I said, "Hi, Sal." He couldn't believe his eyes. But it was quite a surprise for him, I guess. And then he came down to the ship, and that night we watched a movie together. And the next day he came and he brought a Jeep down and took me and the ship's cook, Ben Hardy, on a tour of the island. It's been a greater part of the day just driving around. It was kind of interesting, a lot of sights to see.
Mm-hmm.
And
then you got back on the boat and headed.
And then they got on the boat, and then we headed towards Okinawa.
And what happened?
And then we were there in September, and there was a warning of there were those storms or whatever called typhoons, and we went up north and into a small river, and I guess the typhoon didn't hit it, veered away. But we did a a couple of us, we got off the ship and we kind of roamed around the neighborhood. We found an old farmhouse with third floor, a floor, and a very meager farm. It must have been a hard existence for those people, but I remember they had an old crank-up Victrola, a record player, and I was so surprised to see this record player in this little hut. And I guess the people had fled, or maybe they were in a concentration in a camp or someplace, but nobody was around. But then we went back to the main harbor. It was called Buckner Bay, and another typhoon came and caught us off guard, and that was a very strong storm. The wind gauges only went up to 140 miles an hour, and they were pegging the wind gauge. So, and somebody said they lost more ships in that typhoon than the whole war.
How did your ship and your fellow sailors?
Well, we were anchored there, and the waves are so high and so rough, it snapped both of our anchor chains, so we had to get underway. And we were going, and a lot of other ships were underway also, and we were playing dodge him in this big harbor. And a couple of times we come close to colliding with other ships, but I guess we lost our way and ended up on a reef, and we're pouncing around on this reef, and the wood planks on the bottom. I was in the engine room at the time, and I could see the planks had splintered, and then water was rushing in, so I knew things weren't too well, so I climbed the ladder, went out of the engine room, and then we were bouncing around, and there was another ship ahead of us, a larger ship. It was stuck there, and then all of a sudden, the steel supply barge, it was much larger than us. It was floating also, and it came up and was alongside of us and going back and forth, and so the captain said to seal the hatchway that I'd come out of it, and then said abandon ship. And they started, when the ships had come together, they would jump over onto the supply barge. On the upper deck, they were about level, but I was down a little bit lower, and so one guy, they threw a clothesline to him, and as they were pulling him up, the clothesline broke. He fell in the water and was washed in between the ships, and I thought sure he was going to be crushed as he went between the ships. And another guy climbed up on the anchor chain. It was when it was close together, and then somehow or another, when it came together, and I saw that, I jumped up on the railing of the minesweeper, and I was going to grab on the side of the ship and pull myself up, and a couple of guys were there, and they grabbed each arm and yanked me up. He said I was really lucky there. But well, when I closed this hatch and sealed it, and I looked over and I saw all these sharp rocks on it, and I thought, man, that's going to hurt if I have to go up on those sharp rocks, and the waves are, and the wind was so strong, there was drops of water when it hit your skin. You thought somebody was shooting you with BBs. It stung so much, and I thought sure I was going to die that day, and I really prayed hard. But then I ended up on the deck of that ship, and then while I was there, they were still jumping over from the upper deck minesweeper to the barge, and this chief machinist mate, Marsh, he was a big guy, and he missed a step when the ships were together, and the guys grabbed his arm, and he was dangling on the side of the ship, and they had trouble pulling him up because he was a big guy, and they were all wet, and then the ships come back together again and squashed him from the waist down. And the guy said he just went limp, and maybe the ships rubbing together or something pulled him out. They couldn't hold him anymore, and he fell in the water. It was a missing, lost at sea.
And his name was Marsh, M-A-R-S-H.
Marsh, M-A-R-S-H.
Anybody else get hurt or get lost?
Yeah, the guy that flew, that was on a clothesline and washed away, he survived, and he was washed out to sea. They said they rescued him the next day or so, about 5 miles out to sea. Him and another guy were clinging to some wreckage, and we stayed on the barge for a day or two, and then they put us in a Quonset hut on shore. And a couple of days later, Stiggy, the one that fell in the water.
What was his last name?
Stigler.
Stigler,
and he got a nickname Stiggy. And one day, a couple of days later, when we were in this Quonset hut, he came walking through the doorway, and we thought we saw a ghost because he'd survived the storm and was rescued.
What a story. I did some research, and believe it or not, October 16th, which is today, back in October 16th, 1945, in the newspaper, there was a story about that typhoon, and the title reads, 28 Navy dead, 70 missing after the typhoon hit your group. So that storm that you went through, 28 sailors passed away as of October 16th of that year, and 70 were missing. So I don't know exactly how many actually were found, but I verified that story to see exactly what happened, and there's a big write-up on it, and I'm going to attach that to your...
Yeah, I never heard that, the total. But
Okay, so how did you get home from Okinawa?
Well, they salvaged a lot of equipment from the other ships and stored it on a LST, the tank transport, and it's lucky 3 of us from the minesweeper were assigned to supposedly there to guard our stuff that was from our ship, and we were there for a week or two, and I forget how long, but then they finally put us on a troop ship, went back to California, and we arrived on Christmas Eve in California, and somebody knew the one officer that lived in Long Beach, which is about where we were, and called him, and he came down to see us, and he took us to his home that evening, and he arranged for us to get dress blue clothes so we could go home. And then the next day was Christmas Day. He had us come over for Christmas dinner at his mother's house, and then a day or two later we went home. I got on a train that went to Pennsylvania for my 30-day survivor leave, and then I had a nice time.
Did you continue any relationships with any of your sailors after the war?
Yeah, after the war, when the internet started up, there was something called the White Pages, and then another site where you could get on for free and put in names and get phone numbers, and I found 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of the shipmates from the YMS, and I kept in touch with 3 of them until they passed away. Bill Tickner from Ocala, he ended up in Ocala, Florida, and Stiggy, he became a fireman in Fort Myers Beach. He was a fireman, and then he became the fire chief, and then later he was on the board, I guess we'd call it the commissioner of the board. And the way he ended up, he had waterfront property with a dock, And one day they found him floating in the water alongside the dock, which was kind of ironic. He'd survived that big storm, and then he ended up in the water drowning in front of his home. So, and then Ben Hardy, the cook, ship cook, kept in touch with him. He was the ship's cook, and then he stayed in another year or two, and then he had trouble getting a job, I guess, and he always wanted to go to photography school while he was in the service. While he was a cook, and whoever was in charge, he was stationed on the base where he was a cook on a Navy base there, and whoever was in charge wanted him to advance and become a chief, and he didn't want to. He kept bugging him to go to photography school, so he figured they punished him by shipping him out, and that's how he ended up on the minesweeper. But then when he got out of the service, he talked to the Army recruiter, and they agreed to send him to photography school if he'd sign up, so that's what he did. And he ended up in the Korean War.
Oh, good story.
It was second school he went to was a photo interpreting school, and I guess he set up that division or the photo interpreting thing in Korea, and he got a field commission. He was a lieutenant, and then when he got out of the service, he wrote a book about photo interpreting, and he sent me a copy.
What did you do after the war?
Well, when I had 90 days to get a job back at the steel mills, so I waited till the last minute, and then they put me on a crane, operating a crane for a while. That was interesting. There was like a swimming pool alongside the blast furnace, and when the molten rock and impurities would come out of this blast furnace, it would go into this pool of water, and immediately the rock would pulverize into white sand. And then when it got enough in the bottom of this water, I had the crane operator had a bucket, and would pick up this load of sand and would dump it onto dump trucks, would haul it away. And they used that around the western Pennsylvania area to fill in little hollows and make there's one place near where I lived, it became a shopping center.
And how long did you work there?
I worked there for a few months as a crane operator, and then they transferred him down to the bar mills later as the light man. I was in changing light bulbs of all kinds and switches, and that was it. And I stayed there about 4 years, and until I decided to move to Michigan, around Detroit. But in the meantime, I was going to night school at the University of Pittsburgh. I went 2 years with half a load, and I got about a year's credit there. And then my wife had relatives in Detroit, and I had been there at the school, so I liked the place, and so we decided to move to Michigan.
And how long did you live in Michigan?
For quite some time. I got a job at Revere Copper and Brass for a few months until they went on strike. And then, my wife's cousin worked at the paper mill, and so I went down and with him, and I got a job there as a laborer, and for a year or two, and then when there was an opening for a helper's job in the electric shop, I applied for that, and that's when I started my serious electricians.
And how long did you work there?
I worked at the paper mill for 18 years in the electric shop, and they were. I was filled in for my foreman when he went on vacations, and they were grooming me to become the shop foreman, but I didn't have the personality to be a supervisor, and it was too stressful, so I left there and went to Ford Motor Company. Okay. After 18 years at that paper mill, I went to Ford Motor and Research and Engineering Center, doing electrical maintenance, and I was there for 19 years until I retired in July 1st of 1988.
And how did you make your way down to the Villages, Florida, where you live?
Well, my wife and I, it was into more organ music. We went to a music festival in Orlando, and we heard of another festival a week later, so we went to stayed in a hotel waiting for the other one in that festival, and she was in a laundromat doing some laundry, and I heard ladies talking about good deals in property and mobile homes, and so we would run around looking, and we bought a double wide in a mobile home park over in Boynton Beach, and we were there for away with snowbirds for 7 or 8 years, and then that was too much, so we sold out in Michigan and became permanent residents, and we bought a condo then. We were there for about 8 more years, and then when my wife had some health issues, her daughter lived in the Villages and got a place for us, and that's why we ended up in the Villages. And then my wife had passed away about a year after we moved here.
All right. Did you recently take a flight up to D.C.?
Oh, yes.
Why don't you tell me about that?
It was the honor flight, so that was quite an adventure. Somebody put my name in on the list, and they had a couple meetings before that, and it was a long day. We had to assemble between 1 and 1:30 a.m. in the morning, and then they had a send-off ceremony sort of at the American Legion Hall, and then we got on a bus, went to Sanford Airport, and there were 3 buses, in fact, 96 veterans and 96 guardians and a whole bunch of other people, and then we went at Sanford. They had a plane that was chartered and flew to Washington and got on 3 more buses, and we had breakfast at the airport, I believe. And the next stop was at Arlington National Cemetery, and we went there to see the changing of the guard, and they picked 4 of us to go and lay a wreath at the tomb of the unknown soldier, which is quite an honor.
You were one of the 4?
And I was one of the 4, and I was the only World War II veteran in the flight also, so maybe that's why I got picked. And it was quite an honor to be chosen to lay a wreath at this tomb of the unknown soldier. And then after that, we went to the, they call it the mall, where there's a lot of war memorials. First stop was the World War II memorial, and that was quite impressive. I'd never seen them because I had been to Washington about 40 years ago, and those monuments weren't there then. Yeah. But then we from there, from the World War II, we were running out of time, so they said to pick either the Korean or the Vietnam. So the Korean one was more my time and closer to, so I went to the Korean War Memorial and saw the Iwo Jima statue, which was impressive, And then we assembled and put us on a bus and went back to the airport after that. And then we flew home, and on the plane coming back, I had to go to the bathroom, and I went to the bathroom, and when I come out, there was three stewardesses there. They wanted me to stand in front of them and take a picture. And so, and while I was in the bathroom, somebody made an announcement that I was World War II vet, and I was 99 years old. So when I come out, I started walking back about the middle of my seat, and everybody was clapping. I couldn't figure out why. And then they told me, my guardian told me later, they made an announcement that I was from World War II and 99 years old. So I said, oh, okay.
Well, being 99 years old, do you have any message, any idea, any thoughts that you'd want to leave the future generations who hear this?
Maybe to take life in moderation, I guess. Don't get too stressed out. Maybe do alcohol in moderation and stay away from drugs, especially. So, and that's about it, I guess.
Well, Sam, thank you for sharing your experiences with us. Is there anything else you would like to add if we've not covered it in this interview?
No, I forgot. When after my survivor leave, went to California, got on this destroyer escort, and they were heading towards the South Pacific someplace. And by the time we got to Pearl Harbor, they were a big rush to send everybody home. So they put me off the ship and continued on. And the next day, I went into town on Liberty, and I met my old boot camp buddy, Charlie Robinson, in town, and so we enjoyed spending the day together. And then when I got on a troop ship to come back to the States, that was his troop ship, and so we got to spend a couple more days together until I got to California.
That's a great memory.
Yes.
This ends the oral history of Sam Rickard. America thanks you for your service.
My pleasure.